right. It is now 7:30 p.m. Calling the meeting to order. Let us start our meeting by standing to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, followed by a moment of silence reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Ms. Roberts, please call the roll.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Here.
Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mrs. Johns.
Here.
Mr. Kimmer.
Here.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Here.
All are present. Moving on to minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to view the minutes? And if there are no comments or corrections, motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Ms. Johns makes a motion. I need someone to second.
I'll second.
Mr. Hoffman seconds.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes,
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
motion has passed. Moving on, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No, ma'am.
No adjustments to the agenda. Moving on to Section 2, Superintendent Update. Mr. Valville.
I'm going to keep this pretty brief. Coming off the heels of the state of schools, I know people are probably tired of hearing me talk, and I'm tired of talking. So, first of all, just want to thank board members for their attendance tonight in the state of schools. It does not go unnoticed amongst our staff and in our community. Your presence at events and just your general support of us doing our jobs and like I said, that doesn't go unnoticed. It is very appreciated that you take the time out of your schedules to be present and be there for us. So do thank you for that. I also want to say thank you to my administrators. Our principals just do an incredible job, and day in and day out, the support they give our student body and our staff and our communities is often a thankless job, a tiring job, and they always answer the bell. We're just blessed to have leadership in this district in the form of our principals that truly is second to none. When you look at not just locally but statewide, the team of administrators we have here are special, and we're lucky to have them. So thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules here at the end of the year to present. A lot goes into the state of schools, a lot of time, and they love their kids, they love their buildings, and that was crystal clear. So thank them for that. Agenda items, we have a couple of new hires, and as we get to those, I can talk about them a little bit more specifically. But we're excited whenever we're able to bring new teachers into the fold. We're even more excited when they're members of our Falcon family and coming home. So that is going to be great to get into a little bit more at the top of the agenda there. Also want to touch on the athletic handbook on the agenda. I've asked for the athletic handbook to be approved tonight, but want to let board members know we have removed this section regarding club sports. That we're not indicating that we've made a decision on that. We feel like we need a little bit more time to study travel arrangements and staffing and the financial impact of whether we turn all of our club sports into official school-sponsored sports, whether we do away with clubs, whether we find an alternative to those two options. We just felt like we needed a little bit more time to study that, to make an informed decision. But also, we know that handbook needs to be in place because summer sports are going to get fired up real fast. We already have open gyms going on. As our spring sports are winding down, our fall and winter sports are already going and preparing for the coming year. So we want to get the handbook in place and just realize that we'll be making an adjustment to that in the future, hopefully at one of our June board meetings once we figure out exactly how to handle all of our club sports. So just wanted to point that out on the agenda, and I'll answer any questions board members have. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, recognition of visitors. I don't believe we have anybody here. Okay. Moving on to consent agenda section, item 4.1, workshop and conferences. Need you to review the workshop and conferences that are listed there. And then moving on to financial items, Ms. Roberts.
Sure, I have a few items this evening. The first, I have our April reports for the financial report as well as the insurance report. Unless anybody has any questions on those, I am more than happy to answer them, but I know going into the May forecast, it's going to tell a lot of the same information. I will say with the month of April, there was nothing that stood out from our previous month, so no major new news to talk about. We are still sitting, obviously, in a good position, and I will get into a lot more details in the forecast. So unless there's any questions, and I'm more than happy to go into more detail with that, but unless there's any questions, I'll probably hold that for the forecast. Okay. The other two items that are under the financial area this evening, I am asking for the approval of a transfer of funds. I would like to transfer $500,000 from our general fund to our permanent improvement fund. As you heard Mr. Belleville speak in the state of schools tonight, we have used that fund for quite a few items this year. And we are at about $70,000 in that fund at this time. So I would like to go ahead and transfer some additional funds into permanent improvement to hold us over until we get, our additional funds for next year. And then the only other item is a donation of $50 by Scott and Tina Johns for musicals in memory of Mike Kenwood. And that is it for financials this evening.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, I need an approval for the, a motion to approve the consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent and treasurer. Mr. Smeltzer makes the motion. I need someone to second.
Second.
Mr. Kimmer seconds.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to 5.1, teacher's contract. We have a motion here to approve a one-year teacher contract for Laura Alford as intervention specialist B. And will be, which school system, Mr.
Miss Alford will be teaching at Pleasantville Elementary School.
Pleasantville Elementary, okay.
No, check that,
For
I'm
the
sorry.
20
Intervention specialist at Bremen Elementary School. We're interviewing for Pleasantville second grade Wednesday night. I'm getting my jobs confused at this point. I know, she would take either one, I assure you. This is kind of the one I was talking about at the beginning.
Okay.
Miss Alford, obviously, her husband Joe is teacher here at the high school. But Miss Alford has applied for jobs here in the district a couple times, and during those times, I didn't feel the timing was right for either side, and 1,000% to her credit. She never was frustrated by that. She was always professional. She was always understanding and supportive, and always came back asking, about how to be better, what can I work on, those type of things, and then followed through and would apply when jobs came up. It was that determination that really kind of caught my eye first. She is passionate about kids and education. Whenever we interviewed her about the intervention specialist spot at Bremen, the way that she lit up as she talked about those kids and how she planned to work with students who have challenges, and how she felt she could make a difference, not just in their academic career, but just in their life. It was moving. It was honestly a transformative interview for me. I've had the opportunity to interview her a couple times, talk to her about different positions, and there was just something about this one, and probably showed my cards a little bit too much in the interview. Towards the end of the interview, I asked her, for me, this was a much different interview. She's like, well, good way? I was like, no, in a very good way. This was a much different interview, and I probably showed my cards then that it was hers. Like, there was no real debate. It was just time. Like I said, the passion and the way she lit up whenever she talked about what she could do in the lives of those kids was magical in that moment. And I'm excited to finally bring her to Fairfield Union and to have the entire Alford family here. We talk about family a lot in this district, and we don't just talk about it, we believe it, we live it. To be able to bring her here, honestly, was one of the best phone calls I've been able to make in a long, long time. And I'm just excited to see what she's going to do in her new position. And we're just blessed. We're blessed that she had enough intestinal fortitude to not take no for an answer, and to be determined and come back and say, you know what, I'm going to make it happen. I want to be there. And to have somebody of that high character and that caliber of just guts and grit, we're blessed. We're blessed to be able to bring her on board, and I'm awful excited to be able to finally get to this spot. So, Ms. Alford, anything you'd like to say? Oh, we're going to get to that here in a second. We're going to get to that, don't worry.
I'm super excited. I feel honored. I feel blessed. I've had a really good 8 years of teaching. It's just time to come home. I mean, that's honestly how I feel. I went to Breeden Elementary School. I graduated from high school. And it was just fun. I felt like it was fun. My daughter's in ready to start kindergarten at Breeden. So I'm super excited. So thank you.
Any questions?
No, congratulations. So, I need a motion to approve the teacher contract for Lord Alford.
So moved.
Mr. Kimmer makes a motion. I will second it.
Mr. Kimmer,
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mrs. Johns,
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Now we want
Motion passes.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited. Thank you. I grew up with Shay, so. Yeah, thank you. Nice.
You guys are more than welcome to stay, but you can also leave if you go.
Our daughter's at T-ball.
Oh, there you go. Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Coach, thank you.
Enjoy the nice weather out there. All right, moving on to support service contract. We have a motion on the floor to approve a one-year support service contract for Brenda Deddy as the bus driver for beginning August 13th, 2024.
Yeah, this is the new route that we had posted, or the new position we had posted to help with special education transportation to the Heart to Heart School in South Zanesville. I'm not for sure if Miss Deddy will be taking that route, or if one of our other drivers will take that route, and Miss Deddy will fill in wherever the opening is. But in this day and age where everyone is scrambling for bus drivers and the difficulty in finding drivers, to be able to bring Miss Deddy in with her 21 years of experience as a bus driver is really a good thing. She drove for Groveport Madison, and lives in Pleasantville now, and just a great person, great human being. So I'm happy to bring her on board.
All right, I need a motion on the floor. If there's no other questions or comments.
So moved.
Mr. Hoffman makes a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Ms. John seconds.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mrs. Johns,
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister,
Yes,
Mr. Kimmer,
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
motion passes. Moving on to support service contract for Terry Payne. We need a motion on the floor for a one-year support service contract for Terry Payne as a bus driver.
Yep, Mr. Payne has worked for us this year, and bringing forward another contract. So we're glad to have him back. It's, you know, like I said, everyone is fighting for drivers, and we're lucky to retain them when we can, so
Yeah.
glad to bring a contract forward for Mr. Payne.
All right, need a motion on the floor. Mr. Smeltzer makes a motion. I will second.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, move on to next section, which is resignation for Marcia Pugh as the Assistant Maintenance Employee, effective August 1st, 2024.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about retirements, it's always bittersweet. Happy for Marcia. She has been of great service to this district for a long time, and you know, that Pugh name, it carries a lot of weight around here, and just the dedication and service to the maintenance department in general. Hate to see her go, but you're always happy when somebody reaches that spot to where they can retire, and she's going to be traveling and doing some other things. So happy for her, and sad for us, but I would recommend we approve that.
Are there any questions or comments? Yep.
Yes, I have a comment. I'd like to follow up as well, Mr. Belleville. I've known Marcia Pugh and her husband Tim for many years, and their dedication to the school district is wonderful, and I'm thankful to them. I'm thankful on how many years Marcia has put into this school district, but I go out of my way to say hello to Marcia Pugh and her husband Tim. They're wonderful people, and very, very thankful the dedication and time they put into this Fairview Union School District. Have a lot of respect for them, and wishing them the best in their retirement.
Thank you, Mr. Kimmer.
Thank you. All right, I need a motion on the floor to approve the retirement, the resignation.
So moved.
Mr. Kimmer makes a motion. I need someone to second. Mr. Hoffman seconds.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to resignation for Jessica Notestone as an intervention specialist, effective July 31st, 2024. Is there any
Yeah,
comments?
Ms. Notestone has done an incredible job for our district for several years now, but she's just feeling the draw to be a mom, and you respect that, and probably the most important job she'll ever have. So we support her in that, and we're hopeful if she ever decides to come back to teaching that she'll end up back with us, but would recommend we approve that.
All right. Are there any comments or questions? If not, I need a motion on the floor.
So moved.
Okay, I need a
And I'll
second. Ms. John seconds.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes,
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
motion passes. Moving on to the next section, there's a motion on the floor for a one-day leave without pay for Taylor Claiborne on May 21st, 2024.
Pretty straightforward, just recommend we approve that.
I just need, if there's no additional comments or question, I need a motion on the floor to approve. Mr. Smeltzer makes the motion. I need someone to second.
I'll second.
Mr. Hoffman seconds.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes,
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
motion passes. Moving on to the next one, leave of absence, and there's a motion on the floor for an unpaid leave of absence for the 24-25 school year for Christina Clark.
And Christina is an aide in our BRT at Rushville Middle School, and due to a family situation, she is needing to take a year of unpaid leave. She, very regretful, she offered to resign instead so that we could post that spot and hire someone in, but, we told her she has a right to up to 2 years. She had an unpaid leave this year as well, so this will be her second year. But she's been very cooperative in working with us, and again, it's a family situation that is unavoidable, so our thoughts and prayers go to her family, and again, you know, when someone needs to stay home to be a mom, you applaud that and support them the best you can, so would recommend we approve that.
If there are no other comments or questions, I need a motion on the floor to approve.
So moved.
Ms. Johns makes a motion, I will second.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes,
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
motion passes. Moving on to personal services and supplemental contracts. We had,
Well, I do want to point out one thing. You'll notice a couple changes there. In our new negotiated agreement, we made some changes with supplementals to recognize our head coaches who coached multiple sports. Historically, we would, you know, Coach Myers with the cross-country team is a perfect example. For years, Coach Myers coached the boys and the girls, but he would only receive one supplemental for that spot as being the head cross-country coach. As we went into negotiations, Ms. Roberts and I felt that, you know, coaches who coached both teams deserved to have two supplementals. If we had two separate coaches, one for the girls, one for the boys, we would pay two supplementals. So why is it we're only giving one supplemental to someone who does both? So we approached the association with that change to our negotiated agreement. They were accepting of it and supportive of it. Mr. Denny kind of had a similar idea as we were going through negotiations, so we worked together to address that. So some of our sports where you have you know, one coach doing the men's and the women's, we are now separating those into a head girls coach, head boys coach, and it can be the same person for both. They would just receive two supplementals. So this list is somewhat reflective of that. You'll see Coach Myers listed for boys and girls there. But you'll also see Coach McCafferty listed as head golf coach for the girls. Historically, Coach Oliver has coached the girls and the boys, and oftentimes, and you know, it happened to my daughter, oftentimes the guys and the girls would have matches at the same time in two different locations, and you know, it's impossible to be there for both of them. So we feel like that this is more equitable for our student athletes, also provide better support, better coverage for those, and specifically Coach McCafferty, thank you for joining us this evening. He'll be heading up the girls golf program. He's been working with our junior high team for several years now, and there's a group of girls coming up from the middle school to the high school that we have high hopes for. So he's going to follow those athletes up and take over the girls program. But very much, as you see with all of our programs, the coaches will be working as a team. Coach Oliver, Coach McCafferty. When we get our you know, when we figure out middle school what we're going to do there with golf and a coach in that position, then we'll have all this in place, and looking forward to what that team of coaches will do with the program. But we are excited to bring Coach McCafferty on. Like I said, he's been working with our golf program for multiple years, and we're appreciative of most of that, if not all of it, was volunteer, Coach, right? And you know, we've been on record many, many times of it's not really volunteer. They're paying us to work with our kids. They're not really paying us. They're paying the state, but they have to pay to work with our athletes. So it's an honor to be bringing Coach in as the official, I guess, the official first head girls golf coach. So, Coach, anything you'd like to say?
Just want to make you guys proud, ladies proud, do right by the school.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time and effort, Coach. It's always been appreciated. So,
all right,
thank you.
thank you.
I'm sorry, I just want to say firsthand.
Sure.
I've seen some of the work, you know, that they've done, and been around Ty a little bit, and he definitely cares for the program, cares for the kids, and happy to have him aboard.
Ty's an okay basketball coach, too. I've seen him coach basketball, too.
It's versatile, good. All right, we have no more comments. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Hoffman makes a motion. I need someone to second.
Second.
Mr. Smelter seconds.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes,
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
motion passes.
Coach, you're welcome to stay
Congratulations.
for this evening, but if you want to slip out, that's fine as well. Thanks for being here, Coach.
All right. Moving on to the next personal service supplemental contract with Trent Johns. There's a motion on the floor to approve a personal service supplemental contract for Trent John as Dean of Students.
Really happy to bring this one to the board tonight. As we talked about with the science of reading being implemented at our elementary schools, we know that, there needs to be that level of support for our teachers, and Mr. Knott is going to be heavily involved with the implementation of that curriculum, and to help cover whenever he needs to be at Pleasantville, Mr. Johns will serve as Dean of Students, and he'll plug in wherever he's needed there. We actually, this week, having Mr. Johns go down to Bremen Elementary School to shadow Mr. Knott and kind of get the lay of the land a little bit, so we're not completely throwing him in the deep end at the first day of school next year. But I mean, we maybe held his head under the water just a little bit today, but he came back for more, so that's a good first sign is when they come back for more. But in all honesty, proud is probably the best word I could use, but whenever you have your own staff kind of work and elevate themselves from the classroom to administration in the district, as superintendent, that's always like just an extra little bit of proud, because when you kind of relate that to coaching, that's part of my coaching tree now, that he's working towards administration, a dean of students. It's one of those things, you like to see your own people grow in that capacity and take on more leadership roles, and that's something we've seen here. Coach Schaefer went from the classroom to administration, and you foster that, and Mr. McPhail, from AD, assistant principal, up to principal, and Mr. DeStadio from classroom into assistant principal to director of student services. So whenever you see your staff grow in that capacity and work their way up as superintendent, it's you know the system's working the way it's supposed to, and when you can promote from within, that really strengthens the organization. So I'm extremely happy that I'm able to bring this to you this evening. Mr. Johns, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, sure. I just want to thank the board, Mr. Bobo, and the rest of the admin team for bringing me into the fold in this capacity. And like Mr. Bobo mentioned, I got to hang out at Bremen a little bit today and the next couple of days. It doesn't take long to realize they're a special group down there, and I'm sure I'm going to be able to say the same thing about Pleasantville when I make my way over there. So I'm just excited and glad to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there any comments?
Yes, just one comment. Mr. Belville, I think your words are well said, and I think you hit the key word. We're all extremely proud of Mr. Trent Johns, and I think your words are well spoken and well said.
There we go.
I need a motion on the floor to approve the Dean of Students contract.
So moved.
Mr. Kimmer makes a motion. I need someone to second.
I'll second.
Mr. Hoffman seconds.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Abstain.
John?
Well, you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to leave, so. Oh, yes, that's right.
Work smarter, not harder.
All right, moving on to volunteer, section 5.10, there's a motion on the floor to approve Christina Turner as a volunteer with the agricultural department. Christopher. Need glasses.
Mr. Turner will be starting with us in the 24-25 school year as the new ag teacher. However, as board members are well aware, the work in the ag department starts in the summertime with camps and fair projects and all those type of things. Well, Mr. Turner doesn't want to wait till August to get started with the students, so by contract, contractually, he doesn't start till August. So if we approve him as a volunteer with the district, he can then come and work with our kids. He also allegedly maybe has a CDL and can help drive a bus to ag camp and those type of things. So
nice.
we highly recommend approving him as a volunteer this summer.
All right. Are there any other questions, yes? Comments? Nope. I need a motion on the floor, Mr. Smeltzer. Okay. Need someone to second? I will second.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Moving on to substitute classified list. I'll review the substitute classified list as presented.
These are student workers that we'll have this summer. Mr. Schaffner, anything you want to say about students working?
3 of them are coming back, well, 4 of them are coming back. And then I was able to hire 2 new people this year. And they're going to kind of split a shift. One of them was kind of available in June and then starts band in July. And then another one was busy in June and was available in July. So I'm going to get 2 for the price of 1. We get 2 kids with experience, which is nice to have. And I'm excited about the kids again.
They provide an invaluable service for us, honestly, taking care of all the Chromebooks and cleaning them and fixing them and repairing. And then they also jump in and other projects going on in the IT department, they help with those as well. So really do provide a valuable service to the district and gain incredible experience.
Do they apply through an application or
Yeah.
is there a?
Yes, so we had, I want to say 7 or 8 applicants this year. We do interviews with them, and that's good to get their experience with just doing interviews, because some of these kids have never done interviews before. So,
Oh, yeah.
we like to sit down with them and ask them some questions.
Well, if there are no other, are there any additional comments or questions? I need a motion on the floor to approve the classified list, substitute classified list.
So moved.
Ms. Johns make the motion. I need someone to second.
I'll second.
Mr. Hoffman seconds.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes,
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
motion passes. 5.12, we have a motion on the floor to approve Nathan Hoffman as a post-high school summer student technology worker.
Same thing, Mr. Schaffner, anything?
No? Okay. If there are no additional comments or questions, I need a motion on the floor.
So moved.
Mr. Kimmer makes the motion. I will second it.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Abstain.
Motion passes. Moving on to 5.13, Athletic Participation Handbook. As Mr. Belleville had mentioned earlier, we've all had a chance to review the Athletic Participation Handbooks and revisions. Are there any comments or questions? Okay. I need a motion on the floor to approve the 2024-2025 Athletic Participation Handbook as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Smeltzer makes a motion. I need someone to second.
I'll second.
Ms. Johns seconds.
Mr. Smeltzer?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman? I'm sorry, Mrs. Johns?
Yes.
Sorry. Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to amended salaries, schedules, and rates for 2024, 2025. Ms. Roberts, do you want to have?
Yeah, so the board has actually previously approved salary schedules for next year. One of the things that Mr. Belleville and I are constantly doing is looking at salary schedules from districts surrounding us. We're consistently talking about that, and one of the things that we really saw is that after we approved some things, there were some additional changes that we were able to look at. And one of the things is with our administrators, we only went to step 10. We have now expanded that, and we are going multiple more steps in order to provide just some more area for growth within our administrators, and then also to be able to be a little bit more competitive. We were one of the only districts that only had 10 steps for administrators. So really looking at that and just making some tweaks to that in order to help our administrators. Our opening steps and ending steps are similar to where they used to be. We just have multiple steps in between. That was the only major change within salary schedules.
I assume that helps out with the retention too. that
Correct.
You keep your,
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Are there any additional comments or questions? Okay, if not, I need a motion on the floor.
so moved.
Mr. Hoffman makes a motion. I need a second.
Second, Mr. President.
Mr. Kimmer seconds.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes,
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
motion passes. Moving on to 5.5, fiscal year 2025 insurance rates and providers.
So really happy to bring this to the board this evening. We are proposing that for next school year, we would hold our 4 insurance carriers. And then we are also proposing to hold all of our rates flat except for dental. So we have had a lot of success. We've been self-funded for the past, we're going on 4 years. And we have held our rates flat every single year except for 1 year, which was the year of COVID. So really happy to bring this to the board. As of the end of April, we were $577,000 to the good in our rates for this year. That being said, we ended the month of April in our medical fund at almost $3.9 million. So we are in a good spot. We do believe that the rates that are currently out there will get us through next year. The only difference is we are taking dental rates from $89 to $98. However, that is 100% board paid, so it will not impact our employees from the rate. Our medical claims, our dental claims, just like our medical claims, we have seen a consistent increase in those claims. We're sitting around $200,000 in our in our dental fund, but just feel the need at this point that we do need to increase that slightly, just where we've seen the trends go month after month. Other than that, happy to say, like I said, everything at this point is staying flat.
Are there any comments or questions?
It's great that we are able to go off of that again. I'm sure the staff loves that, so.
Really have, and one thing is actually even within our eye care, we're holding our rates flat, but we're able to actually make our some of the line items within the insurance even better. So for example, instead of getting $100 towards frames or contacts, you can get $130. We're also introducing something called Light Care with all the focus on like blue light glasses and all of that, that some of that can now be covered. So even though we're holding the rate flat, we're actually able to get more for our rates. So really happy to take that. Yeah, I mean, $100 to $130 is helpful. So happy to bring this to the board tonight.
Wonderful news. How do board members get on this?
Yeah. All right. Okay, that's how I need a motion to approve the insurance rates and providers as presented by the fiscal year 2025, or fiscal year 2025.
So moved.
Mr. Kimmer makes a motion. I need someone to second. Mr. Smelter seconds.
Mr. Kimmer,
Yes.
Mr. Smelter,
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to 5.16. There's a motion on the floor for the May 2024 5-year forecast assumptions and notes. Ms. Roberts.
Okay, so obviously there is the attachment in the board agenda, and then I've also put a hard copy of the forecast in front of each of you for this evening. I do want to note that typically what happens is our November forecast is our main forecast. The May forecast is considered an update since we have already seen all 5 years in this forecast. When we get into November, you will then see the next year. So for example, this forecast goes through 2028. The next November forecast, obviously we close out 24, so then we introduce 2029. That being said, the good news is that I do not have any drastic updates from our November forecast. We've put a lot of work into this and looked at all the numbers, tweaked all the numbers, really looked at what is going into everything, but we're not seeing any drastic shifts. And what makes me feel good about that is that I still feel like the numbers that we presented in November are still very solid. So what I'm coming to the table tonight is really happy to say that the district is, Mr. Belleville mentioned it, hovering around $17 million in all 5 years of our forecast. You are seeing a slight increase at the very end of the 5 years in 2028. When I came in here in November, we were at 17,004. We are now at 17,423. So a slight increase to the final year of the forecast. What I do want to do is, if you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the forecast, you'll see page numbers. So I'm going to help just kind of guide you through at a high level. I'm not going to walk through every single detail of this, but there are a few key points that I want to bring your attention to. Starting off on page 3, you will see the 5 years of the forecast. We started this year at $17,396,070. I'm projecting to come in at $17,429,21. So what you'll see is that's a surplus of almost $33,000. It's the $32,951. By the time we get to 2028, like I just mentioned, we will end our 5 years at $17,423,000. One of the things that I will draw your attention to later on when we talk about expenses is our transfers out of the general fund. Keep in mind that this forecast only focuses on general fund. So as we've talked for the past few years, now that our buildings are all hitting about the same age, now that we're talking about our master facilities plan, we are focusing on some of our transfers out of the general fund going to permanent improvement and capital improvement projects. So as I get more into the forecast, I'll talk more to that, but you will see that we are hovering around the $17 million, and we're controlling that based on what we are transferring out of the general fund. If you actually skip to page 5, it's the page that has the revenue notes on it. Again, I'm not going to walk through every single detail of these, but I do want to bring up some of the key highlights within our revenue. The first is within our real estate revenue. You heard a lot of chatter throughout the state this year of real estate prices increasing and real estate values increasing. The majority of the the majority of the counties surrounding us actually just went through a reappraisal this year. However, we actually in Fairfield County do not go through a reappraisal until 2025. So basically you go through a reappraisal every 3 years. So we went through one in 2019 and 22, and then we'll go through another one in 2025. The one thing that we've seen in our last 2 times that we've gone through the reappraisals in 2019 and 22 is that we've had about an average of an 18% increase in our real estate values. However, in those in-between years when we're just going through reevaluations, we've seen an increase in the past of about 3% a year. The past 2 years, we've actually only seen an increase of about 1%. So I do not think going forward we're going to see that big 18% increase again. I have this forecast at a 7% increase. That being said, I do think there potentially could be a little room for some additional revenue, but right now the trend is just not showing it. Since our reevaluation years have been about half of the previous reevaluation years, I'm bringing this and forecasting this in at about a 7% increase versus the 18 that we've seen in the past. Within that, we're also seeing public utility. These are all of our taxes that are generated from like the pipelines, utility companies, anything like that. One of the things that we keep talking about is that we do have two pipelines going through our district, Leach and Rockies. Rockies has been in kind of a legal battle over the last few years of the value of that pipeline. Because of that, they are not paying at their full tax rates. So we saw a slight increase to those rates in this past payment because they're now getting up to the point that basically the law is they have to pay something. But since they're still in the case and it hasn't been fully solved yet, we are still seeing them have delinquent charges. We are modeling a lower collection rate because of this. So I'm modeling a 93% collection rate in our public utilities versus in history we've had almost 100 at 99.7. So just by Rockies not fully paying, we are seeing that continue to decrease, and I'm holding that for the 5 years. As of right now, we do not have a ton of information that is going to be resolved in the next few years, so we're just holding that with a lower collection rate and really watching that. But that is something that is definitely affecting our PUP values within, or I should say our PUP collection rates within taxes. Moving into income tax. This is also an area where we have seen kind of a roller coaster of increases. Luckily, we have seen all positive increases year over year. We've seen anywhere from a 13% increase to a 1% increase in our previous year's history. I do have this forecast, excuse me, averaging out at a 3.7% increase. Again, this year we're only seeing about a 1%. And so a big piece of this is actually within our withholding. So there's different ways, obviously, to pay income tax. And we're really looking at just how our withholdings are coming in year over year, but we're modeling out a 3.7% increase over the 5 years. Other than that, I'm going to jump down to other revenue. I've talked about this month after month, but really happy to say that we are projecting to receive over $1 million in interest income for the year. This is compared to $563,000 last year and under $200,000 in prior years. So obviously we want the markets to keep continuing to increase, but this is also one reason why even though we are at the point that we could start paying off some of our debt, we are using our cash because we are investing it. So our debt is at about a 3% interest rate, which we're receiving over a 5% interest rate in the cash that we haven't invested. So at this point, even though, yes, it would be great to pay off debt just to pay off the debt, we're making our cash work for us, and it's really paying off because we're receiving over $1 million just in interest this year. Any questions on revenues?
Is this increase, this $500,000 increase in regards to moving money around?
We did. So we actually moved, about a year ago, we moved about $9 million from essentially our checking accounts into our investments accounts with Star Ohio and Meter. One of the things that we are doing is we're managing that so that we can basically, Star Ohio are quick investments. They're one-day investments, so we can more or less use it like a checking account. So if we were to need the cash, we can get money out of Star Ohio pretty quickly. Meter is our longer 2 to 5 year investments. When we are really working, they're 2 to 5 years, but we have investments that are maturing every single month. So we're working with our investment advisor and really saying, okay, what are the major payments? Where are the big cash needs that we have for the district, over the next 6 months? What's becoming available to us, and do we want to continue to reinvest that, or do we need it to bring, for whatever it may be, some of our major projects that we have going on. So as we look at that, we're just managing it and making sure that we've talked a lot about making our cash work for us, and we're really doing that, saying, okay, where can we get the most interest and how can we invest that? But that was where we had a lot of cash just sitting in our checking account in the bank. And we earn higher interest rates elsewhere.
It raises your eyebrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay. I am actually going to now skip to page 7. Those are the expenditure notes, so very similar to what we just did with revenues, but skipping over to page 7. A few things here that I do want to talk about. Obviously, salaries are our largest expense within the district. They represent 51% of total expenditures in a given year. The biggest shift that you're going to see actually is in fiscal '25. So going into next year, we have about $744,000 of salaries that we are currently paying through ESSER grant funds that are going to come back to the general fund. Now, we knew this, so we've been forecasting this, we've been projecting this. It's always just kind of been in the future this would happen, but it's now here. So we have, like I said, $744,000 coming back to the general fund in salaries. And then if you jump down to benefits, the same thing is happening with benefits. So any retirement, any board paid medical, dental, vision, all of those benefits will also come back to the general fund. So you will see an increase in salary and benefits, mainly because of that shift from ESSER funds back to the general fund. This also has built in, we're lucky enough just to complete our three-year agreement with our union. So this does have the salary increases built in for the next 3 years as well, based on what was the agreement. Jumping down to purchase services, not a lot of change here. The one thing I do want to call out is we are also paying for our resource officer through ESSER funds, so that will also come back to the general fund. So you will see that that's a pretty big contract that we work with the county sheriff's department that will come back to the general fund that we're currently paying for ESSER. In supplies and materials, we've talked a lot about science of reading. This was something that while we have had the best of plans for our curriculum purchases, one of my big strategies I'm a big proponent of, we do this in a lot of our areas where we have large capital expenditures, is to make sure we're on a rotation, so that basically we're not having to pay for everything all in the same year. In the past, what we have seen with curriculum is we would have about every 3 years, we would have a larger year of curriculum purchases. This year, with science of reading, it was not originally in our forecast. It came up from the state pretty quickly, and we decided to go after it. We wanted to make sure that we think it's the right thing for the students and also mandated by the state. We've talked a lot about our science and social studies curriculum purchases that we just completed in 2024. We will now also complete our science of reading curriculum purchase in 2024. So if you look at our supply costs in 2024, they have gone up by about $400,000 since the last forecast. The other major shift is while instead of we were seeing our curriculum, we are hovering around $125,000 to $150,000 of curriculum purchases every year, and then every third year is around $500,000. We now have built in that every year we're around $500,000. The interesting thing is, and what we're still trying to I would say come up with a game plan on, is now that a lot of curriculum is online, you buy site licenses. Those site licenses are only good for so many years. So what we are seeing is while we used to be able to extend our curriculum purchases through textbooks and through hard materials, you could extend those for multiple years. We now are at a 5-year cap. So now that 5 years is coming about, and I think what we're looking at, and even talking to other districts, of how is everybody tackling this? Like if this is the new norm, how are we tackling this? How are we affording this? So you will see a pretty big increase in our supply forecast in order to pay for that. This is one area that I think we really want to focus on. Obviously, over $500,000 a year is almost $3 million for a 5-year forecast. That is significant for our district. It is larger than we have seen in any history that I have looked at, but I also want to make sure that we are covered. So if that is the new norm, I want to build that into the forecast, but we are also challenging of how are we doing this? What is our game plan for the district, and how are we tackling this? That obviously is one line item that now has a significant amount of weight, and not that it didn't in the past, it just has grown quicker than we had anticipated in November. So it's one thing that we're in constant communication on, and obviously if our students are used to doing everything online, and if that is obviously where the future is going, we want to make sure that we give our students and our faculty and our staff everything that they need from a curriculum standpoint, but at the same time, making sure that we're using, how are we funding this? How are we looking at it? So while you see that line has increased, and we're still in good shape, obviously it's all pieces of the puzzle that we have to fit together and make the cash work. One other thing that I do want to talk about is if you jump down to that page under other uses expenses, the last line in there is that we are planning to move about $15.2 million over the 5 years from our general fund to capital improvement funds. When you actually look at the forecasts, so I'm going to have you actually jump to your next page. If you jump to page 8, if you look at line 5.010, you will see that's operating transfers out. That is cash that we are moving from the general fund, and this is the same thing. We've been doing that, we've forecasted this, our last few forecasts, but we are forecasting that we are moving that money out in order to fund future capital improvements. So improvements around the building, the HVAC systems, the control systems that Mr. Belleville spoke about. Any of the capital improvements that the district needs, either as our buildings are aging, or just new needs around the district. The one area that you will see, if you look back to the forecast in 2021, 22, and 23, this was hovering around $2 million. That actually represents every single quarter we were transferring 0.75% of our 2% of income tax. We are transferring 0.75% to debt payment. We now are really close. We're within $1 million of the cash that we need for our debt payments have already been moved aside. So now that we have that cash sitting there, we can now move those funds for other uses. Now, I said about $1 million. The biggest thing to note is that if you move money into our debt payment fund, you cannot move it out. So what I don't want to do is move too much money into that fund. So as of right now, we have enough money in that fund to cover our future principal payments and then any interest payments before any call-off dates. But what I don't want to do is move additional money into that fund until we're ready to pay off that debt. Because if you move a penny too much, it's in there and you cannot get it out. So over the 5 years, starting with 2024 through 2028, so starting at that 5.147 million, then the 3.65, then the 3 million, all of those, that is where I am equaling that $15.2 million that we're moving from the general fund into some sort of capital improvement fund. Of that $15 million, we know that about $1 million we still have to earmark for debt payoff when we are ready. So there's anywhere from $13 to $14 million that we are moving in order to continue funding to keep our buildings functioning. We're always looking at, we just replaced 2 roofs on 2 of our buildings, but we know we have the other 2 buildings that could potentially need roofs. Our activity center, we're looking at roofs. So just some maintenance projects that are those big capital projects that we know we need to fund and not be scrambling for funds later on. All that being said, we do have a pretty balanced budget for the first 4 years of our forecast. You will see that in year 5 in 2028, I'm deficit spending by $68,000. But again, by the time we get to that point, we can really start to manage that through what we are transferring out and kind of the other expenses that we are really looking at. So overall, I feel really good. Like I said, we're hovering around $17 million. We're actually a little higher. We're around $17,400,000 year over year. But overall, I feel like we're in really good shape currently, and then also what we have going for the future. I kind of think we have both sides of everything covered in order to, make sure things can happen quickly. We would have never anticipated a pandemic. We would have never anticipated state funding right now is only on a 2-year cycle. So this is saying that, okay, state funding will continue as it is. However, we're already 1 year into the 2-year budget. So hopefully they will continue to, use the state funding kind of as they are now, but that is, we don't know. So while $17 million, we're in a very good position, that can start to change quickly if some of those things were to change, if the markets change. if state funding were to change after next year. You know, I would assume we would start hearing some of that in November and December, and then really probably not have exact details until next summer. But overall, I feel like we're in a good spot, but happy to answer any questions.
Mrs. Roberts, I'm truly amazed, you know, with all the unknowns in the science of reading and you know, is this a new norm? And it truly amazes me with the crystal ball, you know, how close we are out there. It just, it's really amazing that so many unknowns, and we continue to adjust, and it's a real challenge, but it's, you know, continue to handle the challenges. So it's always truly amazing as I see the 5-year forecast and see the adjustments made with so many unknowns out there.
Yeah, I think it's nice too, and I think what's nice is that the district has really kind of, you know, everybody in administrator roles and teacher roles and across the building, when we come in and say, okay, we're going to look at this from the ground up, instead of saying, okay, you have $50,000 to run a building, run it. The principals and administrators have done a really good job through budget meetings of coming to the table and saying, okay, here's what I need. And it's not easy. It's not easy to say what we'll need for next year already at this point in time. But I think everybody's done a really good job of really looking at what we need, and then above and beyond that, we don't spend it unless it's something that's a need. And we can't always predict. We're never going to know 100% of what's happened. But I think the team has done a really good job. And it's been also really nice. We also now have an assistant treasurer. So we have, with Mrs. Noland, it's been really nice to have that second set of eyes on things and to really have that of just, hey, even last week, you know, looking at it, I said, okay, what am I missing? I'm missing something in here. Like, what am I missing? And Amy came to the table and said, we're missing next year. We have to pay teacher stipends for science of reading. We're missing that. And it's going to cost the district $125,000. So it's just, it's nice to have that. And it's nice to have those, you know, second set of eyes, and the just kind of the partnership from everybody is helpful. So.
I've always said, I always felt a treasurer's response was, to me, was the sun never seemed to come out. It always seemed to be not a storm, but it was never
Yeah.
And I always had to snicker inside myself, but it's nice to see a little ray of sunshine.
Yes, I agree.
So thank you.
Yes. All right, that's it.
That's it. All right. Are there any additional comments or questions for her? If not, I need a motion to approve the May 2024 5-year forecast assumption and notes. Mr. Schmelzer makes a motion. I need someone to second.
I'll second.
Mr. Hoffman seconds.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes,
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
motion passes. All right, moving on to closing items. The next meeting will be Monday, June 10th at 7 p.m. in the district office conference room. I need if there's no other comments or questions for this meeting, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Hoffman makes the motion. I will second the motion.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes,
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
motion passes.